Hello and Happy New Year, and welcome to the January 2012 installment of the Libertarian Perspective. Sans snappy introduction music and graphics. We're doing a little bare bones approach here today, but stick with us. We'll make it through the show just fine. My name is Doug Klippel. I'm the two-time state chairman, former state chairman of the Libertarian Party of Florida. We appreciate you tuning into today's broadcast. With me, some of my regular partners in crime. Richard Nader, who's on the Libertarian Party of Florida Executive Committee as a regional representative of the Libertarian Party of Florida for this part of the state. Yes, Richard, sir. Great to see you and Happy New Year.
Glad to be here. I'm excited.
All right. And also Jonathan Loesche, who's on the Executive Committee of the Libertarian Party of Duval County. Jonathan, great seeing you again.
Great to see you here. I mean, we only got about 11 more of these until the apocalypse comes.
That's right, yes. We might have to have the Libertarian Perspective Mayan edition, maybe. I mean, who knows? We might have to bring some special effects in for that one or whatever. Well, guys, we get the month of December off in terms of our cable taping, so that means we've actually got almost two full months of chicanery, trickery, deceit, inefficiency, waste, fraud, force from government at all levels to talk about. So we've actually got a pretty full broadcast. Let's go ahead and put an overhead up that talks about what we're going to be discussing today. The first thing is what we're going to call libertarian presidential politics. We've actually got an interesting field of Libertarian Party candidates who have thrown their hat into the presidential ring, the latest of which, Gary Johnson, the former governor of New Mexico. We're going to talk a little bit about him and his candidacy. We're going to talk about the upcoming Florida primary season, which is going to happen at the end of January, and what our crystal balls might say about that. We're going to shed light on something called the National Defense Authorization Act and some of the interesting provisions about that some people in the viewing audience may know about, others may not. We're going to talk about something that you guys were chiming into each other about quite a bit before we started taping, SOPA and PIP, and what those acts possibly mean for internet freedom. And then finally, and what is unfortunately a fairly regularly occurring topic here on the Libertarian Perspective, we're going to move to our topic of government abuse of the month, which is the continued waste of dollars by the JEDC in the recent audit that was recently conducted at the JEDC and some of those findings. Unfortunately, not for the faint of heart or weak of stomach, I'm afraid. So, lots of things to talk about, guys.
I'm excited.
Yeah, but let's go ahead and start with something that's obviously pretty close to home in terms of what's happening with our Libertarian presidential candidates and folks that have thrown the hat in the ring. We've got a quick overhead, then I'll get your reaction to it. Gary Johnson, who's a former governor of New Mexico, who's had libertarian leanings for many, many years and frankly governed with a libertarian streak in a lot of ways, has actually recently thrown his hat into the ring. He actually was seeking the Republican nomination, but decided to actually align himself with the Libertarian Party. He joins 4 or 5 other candidates who are also currently seeking that, so this is not a slam dunk. He's going to have to compete for that, but I want to get your guys' reaction to that. We can see that as governor, some of his key issues included school vouchers, marijuana decriminalization, and low taxes, less government, certainly love that. We call Ron Paul Dr. No, but this guy used veto power 200 times in 6 months. I mean, that's like aerobic use of the veto power there. And as we mentioned, the Libertarian Party Convention is going to be coming up May 4th and 5th, and the ultimate candidate will be selected there, and there are other candidates in the race as well.
So that's the National Convention in Vegas.
Thank you. That's the National Convention in Vegas. Thanks for the clarification. Richard, obviously we've had some notables make rumblings about running as libertarians before, in terms of notables that have had political experience. Mike Gravel, for example, former senator from Alaska, actually did try to be the Libertarian Party nominee in 2008. He was not successful, and Bob Barr, a former congressman from Georgia, ended up being our nominee. But what is your reaction to somebody who's pretty high-profile, experienced like Gary Johnson, who's interested in becoming a Libertarian Party presidential candidate?
Well, as a party man, if you'll pardon the expression, that does cause fights amongst party people, because people think that the Libertarian Party should be above being a party, and which doesn't make any sense to me. The concept of having somebody with that high a name recognition value and that high of a stature, it can be exciting to have somebody like that join us in our fight. Bob Barr did in last time around. The best in a generation, voice of libertarianism, banner carrier, speaker, who took the concepts of liberty and just broke them down into simple, clear language that anybody could understand, was Harry Brown. And Harry Brown, who passed away in 2006, ran for president in 2000. And his campaign and his effect in the political landscape was kind of lost in the whole Bush v. Gore, legal shenanigans that came around as part of that. But he was able to take libertarianism and express it in such a way that made it very clear to me as a political neophyte, and to anybody that cared to listen. He said things like, is your dog a libertarian? Maybe. Is your cat? Absolutely. And that he would close A, B, C, D, and E and break for lunch as his first day as president. And by close, he meant sell the building, lease out space on the mall, and turn the National Mall into a mall. Our candidates that we have now, I believe that we have great candidates at the presidential level and coming up through the ranks that can talk about libertarianism in such a way to carry it forward and to make it understandable. It's not all about wanting to smoke pot. It's not all about caring about your neighbor. Libertarianism is the ultimate caring about your neighbor, that you want your neighbor to be free to seek what he's after and to be who he is, who he sees himself to be, and to not have his neighborhood, his state, his country, his nation, or his government tell him what he has to do with his life.
Yeah, very, very well put. Jonathan, I mean, your reaction to Gary Johnson's decision?
You know, like I said, I agree with Richard in that I think we have a lot of great candidates. Currently, I'm supporting R. Lee Wrights. He is a longtime libertarian activist out of North Carolina, currently residing in Texas, and for a lot of the same reasons that Richard talking to Harry Brown. To me, out of everyone in this race, Lee Wrights, he has expressed the libertarian philosophy and what it means to be a libertarian the best out of anyone in this race. Now, Richard would disagree with me a little bit on that. He's been Roger Gary, I believe, isn't he?
Roger Gary, but haven't shut Lee Wrights out altogether.
But as far as Gary Johnson is concerned, my main concern with Gary Johnson is the fact that most of his press releases so far has been more whining about being shut out of the Republican debates. It's clear the LP is the ugly stepsister in this. And like I said, I know at least 2 state parties, Nebraska and South Carolina, have already basically said, to heck with everybody else, we're endorsing Gary Johnson the moment he say he's coming to the LP. But he clearly doesn't have the baggage Bob Barr does. Where Bob Barr, but still, where is Gary Johnson going to be in 4 years from now? Is he going? Is he going to still be with the LP? Is he, after he gets his? Let's be realistic here. Once he gets maybe his 2-3% of the popular vote in November, if he does get elected, is he going to go right back to the Republicans?
Yeah, it's always been kind of interesting, in that, as I said, we've sometimes had higher profile politicians or even quasi-celebrities that have toyed with the idea of running as libertarians, and it's very interesting to see how this debate internal to the party always around, the purity of our positions. We call ourselves the party of principle, so obviously we want to have a candidate who's steeped in libertarianism, who's been involved with the movement, who embodies what we really believe in. And of course, a lot of people who've been in the political process, their career has been having to make compromises, right, and do things. So when they come in or whatever, there was a presidential nomination, I think it was 2004, when we nominated Michael Badnarik, when we actually had a Hollywood movie producer by the name of Aaron Russo, who was also seeking the nomination, who had some deep pockets and certainly had a lot of contacts. We also had a guy by the name of Gary Nolan, who was a radio host who had media contacts and things. And we went to this convention in Atlanta, and lo and behold, who we ended up choosing, but the person who was actually the most pure libertarian, if you will, who was this gentleman, Michael Badnarik. So yeah, this debate, I think, will continue to evolve, and I think it'll be very interesting just to see how that goes out. But while this has been going on, I think we would be remiss to not take a second as we talk about the presidential race to think about the tremendous forum that we've had for libertarian ideas and the tremendous amount of press talking about libertarian ideals vis-a-vis the candidacy of Ron Paul. And we actually have a overhead that we're going to put up here around Ron Paul. This talks about the fact that, I really do believe he is bringing libertarian ideas to a national stage. Now, obviously, he's running for the Republican nomination, so we don't necessarily participate in that process. But he did finish 3rd in the Iowa straw polling and 2nd in New Hampshire. That just happened last night. His focus being on the national debt, the Federal Reserve, wanting to audit the Fed, and, of course, a non-interventionist foreign policy. he's starting to be described as dangerous by other candidates, which leads to me to believe he's actually making some progress. And it's been very interesting for me to watch the coverage of him on Fox News, which is like, it's this elephant, pardon the pun, in the room that nobody really wants to talk about. The fact that he's placing so well and that his followers are very energetic, while a lot of the other candidates, theirs aren't. Your view of Ron Paul and what he's meaning to the liberty movement in terms of having this audience, having this stage, having this bully pulpit.
May I take this one, Richard?
Go.
I don't give a damn about a so-called liberty movement. You know what? I have to say this before. I don't think Ron Paul. People call Ron Paul libertarian, but I would say he is something more of a federalist. I mean, you look at some of his domestic policies where he'd be okay with 50 different DOMAs, Defense Against Marriage Acts, as long as they're at the state level. He would be okay with he's big about states' rights. I would say, I think a pure libertarian would say, states don't have rights. They have responsibilities to protect the citizens of their states that are beyond what the Constitution protects using the federal government. And I think any politician that sitting here with a straight face that would be okay with states outlawing or being against the rights of its citizens, I have a hard time calling him a libertarian. So, I mean, he's getting some of the ideas. He's fiscally conservative, but I think Ron Paul, he's just waiting to he's going to have his butt handed to him in Florida when he gets about 10%. He's waiting for the greener pastures of bestsellers and getting $10,000 a pop on speaking tours.
Yeah, he's a capitalist, yes.
Those are
your
good points. Actually, I'll be honest with you, as well-meaning as Ron Paul is, and I believe that he is, I believe that he believes every word that he says about constitutionalism and about individual liberty to the extent that he does. He's very much more a constitutionalist and federalist than he is a true libertarian who believes that DOMA shouldn't be something that happens at the state level. It should happens at the living room level, and that's a libertarian perspective. But I also believe that that he is very much like our current president, and that he is very much sitting atop a cult of personality. The Ron Paulies are getting him their votes, but that's what it is, and that's all it is. I don't see a Ron Paul presidency leading a movement. I see a Ron Paul presidency much like a Calvin Coolidge presidency, where everybody's opposed to his policies. He becomes a third-party president. The Republican, and he doesn't even have the benefit of having some place for his followers to go, because he's still a Republican, and his people in Congress that would support him are Republicans and have to answer to their leadership in Congress, and their leadership in Congress is going to be opposed to the Ron Paul principles. If he ever made it to the White House, he would be an ineffective leader.
Yeah, I think you're possibly quite correct on that. I would have to say, though, in terms of giving the devil his due, the amount of media attention and the fact that people are actually talking about auditing the Federal Reserve, the merits of having a non-interventionist foreign policy, the fact of getting our money grounded in sound currency, I certainly do think we do have to give credit for that and acknowledge that. And hopefully, as libertarians, those are things that we can build upon in terms of reinforcing that message and building on those going forward.
But I think the main principle, though, is how do we... Ron Paul said, quite frankly, after this, he's done, as far as, how do we go after this? And that's going to be something that, like I said, how do we convert the cult of personality people who are all about Ron Paul and say, hey, let's go to the party where everyone's talking like this?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, very, very good point. Well, just to quickly wrap up our discussion topic about here the presidential race, we've got one more final overhead around just the Florida presidential primary, which is going to be taking place at the end of the month. Now, the GOP punished Florida for moving their primary date, took half of their delegates away, so there's only 50 delegates here. Because of the size of our state and the number of media markets that we have, there are estimates that actually, to quote unquote run an effective campaign, it costs $1 million a day. I mean, who said politics isn't cheap? And this is a closed primary, so there's no chance for candidates to attract independent voters or anything. Most of the prognosticators are actually seeing Mitt Romney doing well in this state and carrying it pretty comfortably. Do either of your crystal balls tell you anything differently?
No, I think it's going to be Romney with maybe Paul and Gingrich splitting second place. So,
pretty much, Ron Paul's announced, or announced is probably the wrong word, but it's been intimated that Ron Paul's not planning a big expenditure in Florida. But I think that at this point in the campaign, Ron Paul's support is what it is, and media is not going to change that. It may not have peaked yet, but it will at some point. I would like to point out, though, Libertarian candidates. We're going to have our state convention in February, 10th through the 12th in Orlando, and there will be a debate with all of the Libertarian candidates that are currently running at that convention on the 11th of February in Orlando. We're hoping to get picked up on national media with that, and if not, it definitely will be available to our viewers on YouTube.
Fantastic. Sounds great. Well, great. Well, as we segue out of the presidential race and maybe come to some other topics, it's probably a nice opportunity for us to tell the folks out there that are maybe listening to this conversation that may want to learn a little bit about what's happening locally and things along those lines. So, Jonathan, I trust you to kind of give us the web address, a phone number, how people get contacted, and when our next meeting is.
Okay, well, our next meeting is on January the 19th at 6:30 p.m. at the Golden Corral on Southside Boulevard. Web address is www.jaxlp.com, jaxlp.com, and the phone number is area code 904-404-9103. Feel free to call that number as many times as you like. We have plenty of people picking up the lines there. So, and January is a big meeting as well because we will be conducting officer elections. Also, and just come out, it's meet a lot of other like-minded, libertarian-minded people. So.
Fantastic.
And just if you want to participate in officer elections, you do have to be a registered libertarian with the Duval County SOE.
Fantastic. All right, well, great. Well, thanks for the overview. Well, now to a topic that should wipe the smile off anybody's face who's watching right now, as if our discussion of the presidential race didn't do that already. Something that we call the National Defense Authorization Act, and we've got a quick overhead to put up on the screen, maybe for viewers that aren't as familiar with this particular act. This is actually something that is, I guess it's an annual thing because it was just re-signed again at the end of 2011. So the version that's going to be applied here in 2012, it actually guarantees spending provisions for the military. But other provisions in there are really, really troubling in terms of they basically allow the U.S. government to label people terrorists, including U.S. citizens, and it basically incarcerate them indefinitely without even bringing charges against them. So, I mean, these people are ultimately in the Gitmo limbo in terms of they're just being detained indefinitely. They haven't been charged. They don't have any due process clause. The ACLU has been in the forefront of leading this charge. Anthony Romero of the ACLU, his famous quote that's been circulating around the internet is that Obama is going to be known as the president who signed indefinite detention without charge into law. Now, isn't this something like the old USSR used to do with the Gulag system and stuff like that, and exiling people to Siberia and stuff? I mean, this idea that you can take even an American citizen and sentence him or her without formal charges, without due process of law. Don't we have a document that's supposed to cover that? I mean,
there are two. One is the one you're thinking of, the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution grants certain inalienable rights, and among those are no detention without trial, guaranteed a speedy trial, guaranteed to be able to face one's accuser, not testify against oneself, so forth and so on. We defend those rights in court. Take away somebody's access to court, and they lose their right to defend those rights. So what this very much is take people that disagree with government and round them up and toss them in camps. The camps have already set up. FEMA's running the camps. There's 4 of them so far, and the idea is that the Army is supposed to detain them, but there's already a precedent of federal law enforcement turning people over to the military for detention purposes. The shoe bomber guy and the underwear bomber guy both had that happen to them, and they're both in military detention now. This is couched in lots of pretty language. The NDA, by the way, is the annual defense, one of the 13 appropriations bills that are supposed to be generated every year as part of the budget. And this just got stuck into it. This was proposed and advanced by both parties, by powerful leaders in both parties, including the Republican presidential candidate from 2008, and was signed by the Democratic presidential candidate from 2008. So if you're wondering who's in favor of this and who's against this, the Libertarian Party is against this.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And as a member of that party, I'd like to say at this time that I like President Obama, and I like the U.S. government, and please don't come and take me and my family away. And I'll be taking down my yellow flag that says, "Don't tread on me," as soon as I get back home. Thank you very much.
So this is having its intended effect, yeah. So. Jonathan, your reaction to all of this?
Well, if the Mayan apocalypse doesn't get us, I look forward to doing the January 2013 edition from this in a FEMA camp in Alaska.
Take a code.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, this is just a gross abuse of government power. And like I said, Richard said earlier about the cult of personality. I've been arguing with liberal friends of mine who are like, oh, no, Obama didn't sign this. I'm like, no, he made vague promises that under his administration he won't do this. Which, let's see, he's made vague promises on the campaign trail about not raiding medical marijuana clinics in states that that they're already legal. He made vague promises about closing Gitmo. He made vague promises about taking all the troops out of Iraq when we still have, what, about 20,000 in there? What promises has Obama made that, besides the gross, negligent health care bill, has he kept? And what makes you think that he will keep any promises on this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that, certainly from my perspective, I mean, I guess if this was an easy question around kind of where the balance around national security stops and where individual freedom starts, I suppose it was an easy question, we could all be in agreement or whatever. I mean, on one hand, obviously, we do need to be very concerned about government activities that spy on citizens, infringe on liberty and things along those lines. There probably is some, data gathering, monitoring of situations that law enforcement is probably appropriate to do. I mean, we may disagree in terms of where the level of that starts and stops. But the idea that somebody could be just kind of declared an enemy of the state, I mean, again, this is right out of the USSR, this is right out of the Gulf, and that we are actually applying those principles here is absolutely frightening. I remember about 2 or so years ago, I was at a meeting here in Jacksonville where there was a presentation from a military officer who had some responsibilities over in Iraq. I think he was a major or something along those lines. And I asked him some general question about, well, how do you decide who gets thrown into Gitmo and who not or whatever? And he just basically said the bad people get thrown in there. And it was said with such a clarity of purpose and certainty that you could tell that there was no questioning in this guy's mind that he was doing the right thing. But isn't that what got other systems like the USSR and China and the Eastern Bloc, isn't that what got those countries into trouble?
Well, when you're in Iraq, and I'm going to give your guy the benefit of the doubt here, when you're in Iraq and you're hiding behind your Humvee and there's another guy around the corner and with a Kalashnikov or a rock or whatever, and you're shooting at him and he's shooting at you, and you manage to kneecap him instead of putting one in his head, and you drag him off somewhere, you know where he stands. Okay, his actions have spoken for him. He is on a battlefield in a in a war zone, shooting at an American soldier, and that American soldier is an eyewitness, and I assume not the only. I hope he's not the only eyewitness at that scene. It should be, in his eyes, pretty clear cut who the bad guy is and who the bystander is. I'll give him that benefit of the doubt. But a political organization is eventually, and it's usually not going to take very long, going to come to the conclusion that people that disagree with them are bad guys. Yeah. And now, with that definition of bad guy, we have now bad guy gets rounded up and tossed into a camp. Yeah. It's already been said that minor party members, ex-military groups, oath keepers, militia groups, are domestic terrorists. They've already been branded domestic terrorists. OWS folks have already been branded domestic terrorists.
Yeah,
so round them up and chuck them in camps, because the legal justification, and the quotes aren't around justification, people, they're around legal, okay? Yeah. The legal justification for all of this has already been laid out. So now that we have NDAA, they simply show up. The only thing left to do is paint the bands.
Yeah.
And then they show up and...
Right, and I mean, you know, obviously it has to be around due process. I mean, a couple of months back we had a U.S. citizen that was killed overseas. I think it was by a drone strike, if I remember properly. No due process. I mean, basically it was kind of almost like an executive order, which is actually, pretty scary. But we're actually down to 5 minutes, so we're going to actually go ahead and move on to this, but we'll be talking more about this in other broadcasts. Let's go ahead and put up our next overhead, and this is something you guys have more knowledge and insight into than what I do. It's this stuff called SOPA and PIP, which is the Stop Online Piracy Act, and the Protected Intellectual Property Act. We can see that up there that these are some acts that are designed to enable the Department of Justice or copyright holders, ostensibly through the judicial process, to shut down websites, bar advertisers, bar services from certain websites that are seen as being in copyright infringement. And obviously a lot of people are raising First Amendment and censorship concerns around these very issues. Jonathan, why is this such an important issue?
Because this effectively, if you like to go to China or Iran, or if you like the internet service there, that's effectively what the United States would become. This gives the United States practically a blank check to shut down whatever sites that they like for whatever reason. And I think this bill is everything against libertarian state, because it's crony capitalism, because it's the MPA and RIAA forcing using the government to promote a cartel that really has no business left in the marketplace. You know, there's no reason that any artist should have to go through a studio and then put a physical CD out in Best Buy to make money anymore these days. And then with the government, like I said, this is carte blanche to just do whatever they want. And what's worse is that the websites that these studios want taken out, most of them aren't even hosted on DNS servers in the United States. You know, like the Pirate Bay is hosted in the Netherlands, which is sort of the main one that a lot of these places want taken down. And this is what happens, like I said, when you have old people out of touch with reality trying to legislate the internet. They have no idea really what it was. I mean, it's like when that one judge in the Netherlands tried to shut down the Pirate Bay. He's like, okay, you can't use the Pirate Bay in the Netherlands. All they did was register 15 new addresses and put the thing right back up.
Richard, very, very quickly, your comments on this, a minute or less, because we're running down.
Yeah. I understand. If you take into account the Patriot Act, gives the government the ability to monitor internet, everybody's internet, and determine who's doing what, who's saying what, and where. You take the NDAA and their ability to round people up and chuck them in the jail. Then you add in this. Now what the government has the ability to do is listen to you, monitor what you say, decide you're an enemy of the state, take away your voice and chuck you in jail. And nowhere in there did I mention law enforcement, cops, judges, juries, warrants,
lawyers,
or anything. Just you shoot your mouth off, boom.
Signed, sealed, delivered, huh? Yeah.
That's it. That's what I got.
That's a fairly frightening concept.
I beat the time clock?
I hate you did. I have to end on that note, but you summarized it beautifully.
George Orwell would love it.
Yeah, he absolutely would. 1984 Part 2. We are coming down to the end of the broadcast, so we're actually going to save our government abuse of the month of JDC until next month. But unfortunately, as you know, it's not good news. Forewarned is formed. It's not good news in terms of the JDC, in terms of this mismanagement. Maybe all of your worst fears, like I've had over these years, were actually confirmed by this recent city audit, which is a very, very unfortunate situation. But we'll cover that next time. Richard, thank you for showing up and joining us. Jonathan, great seeing you as always. Remember our upcoming Libertarian Party meetings. Quick, Jonathan, the 19th, did you
January
say?
19th at 6:30.
January 19th, 6:30. Golden Corral, Southside?
Yes.
All right, same bat time, same bat channel. We appreciate you tuning in. Look for us Wednesdays at 7 o'clock on Comcast Community Access. We also circulate at other times, so if you're channel surfing and you see us, stop and tune in. We'll look forward to seeing you next time on the Libertarian